The air is thick with the scent of burning copal as shadows dance across the stone walls of the ancient temple. Torchlight flickers over the faces of masked priests, their chants rising in a haunting rhythm. Below them, a figure lies motionless on the sacrificial altar, the glint of an obsidian blade catching the firelight. This is no ordinary ceremony. It's a gateway to the divine, a moment where the mortal world brushes against the mysteries of the unseen. Welcome to the hidden world of ancient Mesoamerica, where rituals weren't just traditions, they were lifelines to the gods. In this video, we're pulling back the veil on 35 of the most enigmatic rites ever practiced by civilizations like the Maya, the Aztecs, and the Olmecs. From blood-soaked altars to celestial dances, these rituals were more than spectacle. They were the heartbeat of empires. Some were so secret, their true meanings have been lost to time, leaving even modern archaeologists baffled. Were they acts of devotion, desperate pleas for survival, or something far darker? By the time we're done, you'll witness the chilling ballgame where losers lost their heads, the flaying rituals meant to renew the earth, and the midnight ceremonies where shamans became jaguars. But be warned, these aren't just stories. They're fragments of a world where the line between life and death was as thin as a blade's edge. So stay close, because the deeper we go, the more these ancient whispers begin to sound like echoes of something unsettlingly familiar. Now, let's step onto the sacred court where life and death played out in a game far deadlier than any modern sport. The Mesoamerican ball game, known as Tzompantli, was no ordinary competition. It was a cosmic battle, a ritual reenactment of the struggle between light and darkness. Imagine two teams clashing on a long, narrow court, their heavy rubber balls symbolizing the sun's perilous journey across the sky. But here's the twist: losing wasn't just a blow to pride. For the captain of the defeated team, it could mean the ultimate sacrifice, decapitation. This brutal practice wasn't random violence. It was deeply tied to the Popol Vuh, the sacred Maya text that tells of the hero twins' descent into the underworld. Just as the twins faced deadly ball games against the gods of death, human players mirrored their fate. Before the match, players would perform bloodletting ceremonies, piercing their skin to offer their blood as tribute. The stakes couldn't be higher, and the grisly symbolism didn't end there. Archaeologists have found evidence that skulls of sacrificed players were sometimes used as goalposts or displayed on racks, turning the court into a chilling reminder of the game's sacred purpose. At Chichen Itza, the towering walls of the Great Ball Court still echo with whispers of these rituals, their carvings showing players kneeling beside executioners, their heads severed mid-game. Was this sport or sacred theater? For the Maya and Aztecs, it was both a deadly dance where victory meant glory, and defeat meant becoming part of the cosmic order itself. But the ball game was just one of many rituals where life was offered to the gods. Now, picture the towering steps of an Aztec temple, where the most infamous sacrifice of all took place, the heart extraction on the Temalacatl, the sacrificial stone. This wasn't just killing, it was a meticulously choreographed ceremony, a sacred act meant to sustain the universe itself. The victim, often a captured warrior, was painted head to toe in blue, the color of sacrifice, symbolizing the sky and the divine. 4 priests, each representing a cardinal direction, would pin the victim down on the curved stone. Then, with a single swift motion, a 5th priest would plunge an obsidian knife into the chest, slicing through flesh and bone to reach the still beating heart. In one fluid movement, the heart was ripped out and raised toward the sun, an offering to Huitzilopochtli, the fierce sun god who demanded blood to keep the world from plunging into darkness. To the Aztecs, this wasn't murder. It was a flowery death, the highest honor. They believed the sacrificed would join the sun god's celestial army, fighting alongside him in the sky. The iconic Tlaloc stone, carved with the goddess of earth and death, stands as a haunting reminder of this belief. Her skirt of writhing snakes and necklace of human hearts speaks to the cycle of life and death that these rituals upheld. What's chilling is the scale. Historians estimate that thousands of hearts were torn out each year in Tenochtitlan alone. The stones themselves, slick with blood, became altars of power, where the line between the mortal world and the divine blurred with every sacrifice. For the Aztecs, this was the price of existence, a bargain written not in ink but in blood. Yet even the heart sacrifices paled in comparison to the sheer horror of the next ritual, the flaying ceremonies of Xipe Totec, the flayed lord. This deity, draped in the skin of a sacrificial victim, embodied the brutal cycle of death and rebirth that defined Mesoamerican spirituality. The ritual began with a mock battle, where captured warriors were forced to fight with feathered clubs against fully armed Aztec soldiers. It was a cruel charade, a gladiatorial spectacle where the outcome was never in doubt. The captives, exhausted and outmatched, were eventually subdued. Then came the flaying. Priests would carefully peel the skin from the victim's body in one piece, like removing a glove. The still warm hide was then worn by a priest who paraded through the streets for 20 days, the rotting flesh clinging to him like a second layer. To onlookers, this wasn't just gore, it was profound symbolism. The decaying skin mirrored the husk of a cornstalk, shedding to make way for new growth. Xipe Totec, often depicted with hollow eyes and a gaping mouth, was a god of renewal, his gruesome rituals ensuring fertile fields and abundant harvests. By the end of the 20 days, the priest would remove the withered skin, burying it in a sacred pit as an offering to the earth itself. What's striking is how deeply this ritual was woven into daily life. Farmers prayed to Xipe Totec before planting, artisans crafted gold masks in his likeness, and even the emperor participated in ceremonies where he wore the flayed skin of a sacrificed king from a rival city. It was a visceral reminder that life sprang from death, that every seed in the ground owed its growth to blood spilled in the temples above. But not all Mesoamerican rituals were soaked in blood. Among the most breathtaking was the ancient sky dance of the Voladores, a ritual so mesmerizing it still takes place today. Picture this: 5 men climb a towering pole over 100 feet high with nothing but ropes tied around their waists. One stays atop playing a flute and drum, while the other 4 launch themselves backward, spinning slowly toward the ground as their ropes unwind. This wasn't just spectacle, it was sacred geometry in motion. The 4 flyers represented the cardinal directions, their descent mirroring the sun's journey across the sky, the 13 rotations each man completed. That matched the number of levels in the Mayan celestial realm, tying the dance to the very fabric of time itself. The flute player at the top embodied the Axis Mundi, the world tree connecting Earth to the heavens. What's astonishing is how little this ritual has changed. In Tzompantli, Mexico, the Totonac people still perform the Voladores dance, using the same techniques passed down for centuries. But make no mistake, this is no tourist act. One misstep, one frayed rope, and the dancers plummet to their deaths. Modern performers train for years, learning to control every spin, every twist of the rope, just as their ancestors did. The Voladores remind us that Mesoamerican spirituality wasn't just about death, it was about balance. Where Xipe Totec's rites honored the Earth's renewal, this sky dance celebrated the cosmos itself, a dizzying reminder that humans could touch the divine without shedding a drop of blood. Now, let's turn to a ritual born from one of the deepest fears of the Aztec world, the terror that the sun might never rise again. Every 52 years, as their calendar completed a full cycle, the Aztecs believed the universe teetered on the edge of collapse. To prevent eternal darkness, they performed the new fire ceremony, a night of collective dread and desperate hope. Imagine the scene as darkness fell. Priests extinguished every fire in the empire, from the grandest temple to the humblest hearth. The world plunged into silence, families huddled together, clutching their most precious possessions, unsure if dawn would ever come. On a hilltop outside Tenochtitlan, priests gathered around a captive warrior, his chest painted blue for sacrifice. At the stroke of midnight, they cut out his heart, and in the gaping wound they kindled a new flame, a spark to reignite the sun itself. The moment that fire blazed to life, runners carried torches in every direction, racing to relight the empire before the gods abandoned them. When the first light of dawn finally broke, the relief was palpable. The world had been granted another 52 years. This ritual's echoes reached far beyond the Aztec era. Remember the panic in 2012 when some feared the Mayan calendar predicted the end of the world? That hysteria was a distant cousin to the Aztecs' new fire ceremony, proof that humanity's fear of cosmic collapse never truly fades. The Aztecs didn't just perform a ritual, they stared into the abyss and dared to believe they could hold back the night. While the Aztecs feared the collapse of the cosmos, Maya rulers took a more personal approach to keeping the universe in balance through their own blood. Royal bloodletting wasn't just a ritual, it was a sacred duty, a direct line between kings and gods. Picture Shield Jaguar III, a mighty Maya king standing before his people. He grips a stingray spine, its needle-sharp tip glinting in the torchlight. Without flinching, he drives it through his tongue, letting his blood drip onto strips of bark paper. The pain was part of the power. This wasn't just sacrifice, it was transformation. As blood loss blurred the line between worlds, kings reported visions of ancestors and gods, messages from beyond the veil. But the ritual didn't end there. The blood-soaked paper was gathered and burned, the smoke carrying royal offerings straight to the heavens. This wasn't just symbolism. The Maya believed the universe ran on a delicate balance, and only royal blood could keep the gears turning. Droughts, wars, even the movement of the stars, all depended on these acts of devotion. Some of the most striking evidence comes from Yaxchilan, where stone carvings show Lady Zoc, Shield Jaguar's queen, performing her own bloodletting. In one famous lintel, she pulls a thorn-studded rope through her tongue, her face serene as her blood falls into a basket. These weren't hidden ceremonies, they were public spectacles, proof that royalty bore the weight of the world literally in their veins. What's startling is how calculated it all was. The stingray spines, the specific days chosen for the rituals, even the way the blood was collected, every detail tied to celestial events and sacred calendars. This wasn't random suffering, it was a precise science of sacrifice, one that bound kings, people, and gods in an unbreakable covenant. Now let's dive into one of the most haunting sites in Mesoamerica, the sacred cenote at Chichen Itza. This massive sinkhole, over 60 meters wide, wasn't just a source of water. It was a gateway to the underworld, a place where the Maya sent offerings to Tzoc, the fearsome rain god. Imagine standing at the edge of this dark, gaping pit. Below, the water stretches deep and still, hiding secrets swallowed centuries ago. The Maya believed this was where the gods lived, and to keep them happy, they threw in treasures beyond counting: golden figurines, jade masks, even delicate bells crafted to mimic the sound of rain. But the most chilling offerings weren't objects, they were people. In the early 1900s, dredging operations pulled up bones alongside the glittering artifacts. Among them was the famous Golden Boy, a skeleton adorned with gold ornaments, likely a noble sacrifice. But who were these victims? Some scholars argue they were volunteers, chosen for the honor of serving the gods. Others point to the remains of children and warriors, suggesting war captives or desperate pleas for rain during droughts. What's undeniable is the cenote's power. Even today, diving into its depths feels like entering another world. The water is so dark, so heavy with history, that every artifact recovered tells a story, not just of sacrifice, but of a civilization that saw the divine in every storm, every drop of water. The sacred cenote wasn't just a ritual site, it was a mirror of the Maya's deepest fears and hopes, a place where life and death, earth and sky met in a single sacred plunge. Now, let's turn our attention to a figure who shatters the delicate image of butterflies we know today, Xipe Totec, the Obsidian Butterfly. This Mesoamerican warrior goddess was anything but gentle. Cloaked in darkness, her priests wore eerie butterfly insignias and performed secretive rites under the cover of night, often fueled by powerful hallucinogens. Tzompantli wasn't just a goddess of war. She ruled over a terrifying realm of star demons, celestial beings the Aztecs believed descended to Earth during eclipses to devour souls. Her followers, the Cihuatateo, were said to be the spirits of women who died in childbirth, transformed into vampiric creatures haunting crossroads. Some accounts even whisper of ritual cannibalism, where her priests consumed flesh in sacred feasts to channel her ferocity. Yet what's most striking is the contrast between her and the butterflies we admire today. Where modern minds see symbols of transformation and beauty, the Aztecs saw razor-edged wings of obsidian, a creature as deadly as it was divine. Tzompantl's cult reminds us that in Mesoamerica, even the most delicate symbols could hold a blade's edge. Her legacy lingers in the artifacts left behind, carvings of skeletal butterflies, their wings spread like knives, a silent testament to a world where the sacred was never safe. But let's shift our focus to a ritual that chills the soul even today. The sacrifices made to Tlaloc, the Aztec god of rain. Unlike other deities who demanded warriors, Tlaloc required something far more heartbreaking: children. These young victims were carefully chosen, not for their strength but for their tears. The Aztecs believed a child's weeping was a powerful omen, a sign that rain would soon follow. The ceremonies were as harrowing as they were precise. Some children were drowned in sacred springs, their final breaths offered to the waters Tlaloc ruled. Others were entombed alive, their bodies arranged in ceremonial poses, often painted blue, the color of rain and sacrifice. Archaeologists made a grim discovery in 2021 at Mexico City's Templo Mayor, unearthing the remains of children still curled in these ritual positions, their bones stained with ceremonial pigments. What makes these sacrifices so haunting is the twisted logic behind them. In a land where crops lived or died by the rains, the Aztecs saw these acts not as cruelty but as necessity. To them, a child's life given to Tlaloc was a plea for survival, a desperate bargain to keep their world from withering. Yet today, those tiny skeletons remind us of the brutal cost of faith in an unforgiving world. Now, let's turn our attention to one of the most chilling displays of Aztec ritual power, the skull rack, or Tzompantli. These towering structures were more than just grim trophies. They were symbols of divine order, built to honor the gods and terrify enemies. Picture a massive wooden framework, rows upon rows of skulls staring blankly into the distance, a silent testament to the scale of sacrifice in the Aztec world. The process was methodical. After a victim's heart was offered to the gods, their head was severed and carefully prepared. The flesh was removed and the skull was drilled with holes on either side, allowing it to be strung onto wooden poles like macabre beads. These poles were then mounted horizontally between vertical posts, creating a gruesome facade that could stretch for dozens of feet. In 2017, archaeologists in Mexico City uncovered one of the most staggering examples yet, a Tzompantli measuring 60 feet long with thousands of skulls packed tightly together. What's even more unsettling is how these skulls were arranged long after death. As the wooden racks decayed over time, the skulls weren't discarded. Instead, they were mortared together into towering walls, transforming the Tzompantli into a permanent monument of bone. This wasn't just about intimidation. For the Aztecs, the Tzompantli served a sacred purpose. Each skull represented a life given to sustain the cosmos, a belief that death fed the gods and kept the world in balance. Yet for modern eyes, these racks force us to confront a civilization where reverence and brutality walked hand in hand. The next time you stroll through Mexico City's bustling streets, remember, beneath your feet lie echoes of a time when skulls were currency, and the line between worship and warfare was razor-thin. But not all Mesoamerican rituals were about blood and sacrifice. Some were celebrations of life, pleasure, and even intoxication. Enter the world of pulque, the sacred fermented drink of the gods. Made from the sap of the maguey plant, this milky, frothy beverage was far more than just alcohol to the Aztecs. It was a divine gift, tied to a pantheon of deities known as the 400 rabbits. Legend says these rabbit gods embodied every possible state of drunkenness, from joyful revelry to stumbling chaos. And when the Aztecs honored them, the ceremonies were anything but subdued. Imagine priests and nobles gathering in temple courtyards, drinking pulque from elaborately painted bowls. The goal wasn't just to get drunk, it was to reach a sacred state of ecstasy where the boundaries between the human and divine blurred. Part of the ritual involved deliberate vomiting, seen as a purifying act. Participants would drink until they expelled the pulque, symbolizing the release of impurities and the renewal of the spirit. These ceremonies often spiraled into wild, chaotic gatherings, with music, dancing, and uninhibited behavior, a stark contrast to the solemn blood rites we've explored so far. But when the Spanish arrived, they were horrified. To them, these drunken orgies were proof of indigenous savagery, and they quickly moved to ban pulque rituals, replacing them with European wine for Christian sacraments. Yet even today, pulque survives in remote villages, a fizzy, tangy reminder of a time when intoxication wasn't just tolerated, it was worship. From skull racks to sacred binges, Mesoamerican rituals reveal a culture that embraced both the brutal and the joyful, all in the name of the divine. Next, we'll see how the movements of the stars shaped their wars and their sacrifices. Now, let's turn our gaze upward, to the stars, where the Maya saw not just celestial bodies but divine warriors shaping the fate of their world. The planet Venus held a terrifying significance in Mesoamerican cosmology. To the Maya, it wasn't merely a bright light in the sky, it was a harbinger of war, a celestial blade that dictated when blood should spill on the battlefield. The Maya meticulously tracked Venus's movements, recording its cycles in sacred texts like the Dresden Codex. They noticed a pattern. When Venus appeared as the morning star, it signaled the perfect time to raid enemy cities. These weren't random attacks but carefully orchestrated campaigns, timed to align with the planet's position. Warriors believed Venus infused them with divine strength, turning battles into rituals where every clash honored the gods. But conquest wasn't the only goal. Captives taken in these star wars weren't just prisoners, they were offerings. The Maya saw Venus as a ravenous celestial warrior, demanding blood to sustain its cosmic battle against darkness. Captives were paraded through cities, then sacrificed in elaborate ceremonies, their hearts offered to the sky. The belief was simple: without these offerings, Venus might falter, plunging the world into chaos. The Dresden Codex reveals just how precise these rituals were. Its Venus tables predict the planet's movements with astonishing accuracy, proving how deeply astronomy and warfare intertwined. Imagine Maya priests huddled over these texts, calculating the perfect moment to strike, convinced the stars themselves commanded their blades. From pulque-fueled revelry to star-guided warfare, Mesoamerican rituals show a civilization that saw the divine in every facet of existence, even in the cold light of a distant planet. Next, we'll descend into the shadows, where shamans sought to harness the power of the jungle's most feared predator. But the stars weren't the only source of power in the Mesoamerican world. Deep in the jungle, another kind of transformation was taking place, one that blurred the line between human and beast. Among the Olmec and Maya, shamans sought to become something more than mortal by channeling the spirit of the jungle's most feared predator, the jaguar. This wasn't just symbolic, it was a visceral, physical transformation. Shamans prepared for the ritual by consuming powerful hallucinogens, often administered through enemas to speed their effects. The goal: to cross into the spirit world where they could merge with the jaguar's essence. Imagine the intensity of this experience, the rush of the drug, the sensation of claws erupting from fingertips, the low growl building in the throat. To those watching, the shaman didn't just resemble a jaguar, they became one. Art from this era is filled with eerie jaguar imagery. Olmec sculptures show figures with snarling jaguar mouths and human bodies, their faces twisted in a snarl. The Maya, too, depicted rulers wearing jaguar pelts, their teeth bared as if mid-transformation. These weren't just decorations, they were declarations of power. The jaguar was the undisputed king of the underworld, a creature that moved effortlessly between realms. By becoming one, shamans gained access to its fearsome strength and otherworldly knowledge. But the ritual wasn't complete without purification. After the visions faded, shamans would vomit violently, expelling both the drugs and the jaguar's spirit from their bodies. This wasn't seen as failure, but as part of the cycle, a return to humanity after walking the razor's edge between worlds. The jaguar's symbolism ran deep. It wasn't just a predator, it was a guardian of the night, a bridge between life and death. To wear its skin or channel its spirit was to tap into raw, untamed power, the kind that could protect a kingdom or curse an enemy. And as we'll soon see, this connection between humans and animals didn't end with the jaguar. Other creatures, too, held secrets the Mesoamericans were desperate to unlock. Now, let's step into the steamy darkness of the Temalacatl, where purification wasn't just about cleansing the body. It was a trial by fire and sweat. These dome-shaped sweat lodges were far more than ancient saunas. They were sacred spaces where Mesoamericans prepared for major rituals by enduring intense heat, hallucinogenic vapors, and spiritual rebirth. Picture the scene, stones glowing red-hot in the center, water hissing as it hit them, filling the air with thick, aromatic steam. But this wasn't just water, it was infused with potent herbs like sage, copal, and even psychoactive plants to open the mind to visions. As the heat climbed, priests would chant invocations to Tlaloc, the goddess of filth and purification. She was a paradox, both the collector of sins and the one who washed them away. Participants believed that as they sweated, their impurities were drawn out and consumed by her. The experience was grueling. The air grew so thick it was hard to breathe, and the heat pressed down like a physical weight. Yet this suffering had a purpose. It mirrored the trials of the gods who endured hardship to create the world. Those who lasted emerged drenched, dizzy, and utterly transformed, stripped of their old selves and ready to face the sacred rites ahead. This wasn't just physical endurance, it was a symbolic death and rebirth. The Temalacatl represented the womb of the earth, and exiting it was like being born anew. Warriors, priests, and even expectant mothers underwent this ordeal, believing it granted them strength, clarity, and divine favor. And as we'll see next, this idea of transformation didn't end at the sweat lodge's door. Other rituals pushed the boundaries of human endurance even further, all in pursuit of something greater than themselves. Now we turn from the steamy trials of the sweat lodge to a myth that lies at the very heart of Mesoamerican survival, the story of the Corn Maiden. This wasn't just a tale told around fires, it was a sacred narrative brought to life through ritual, one that bound the fate of humanity to the cycles of maize, the lifeblood of civilizations like the Maya. According to the Popol Vuh, the great Maya creation epic, the gods struggled to create beings worthy of worship. Their first attempts failed until they shaped humans from maize dough, infusing them with the spirit of the sacred crop. But this gift came at a price. The myth tells of a maiden whose blood, spilled upon the earth, caused the first corn to sprout, a divine exchange of life for life. Centuries later, this story was reenacted in chilling ceremonies. Young girls, chosen for their purity, were dressed in elaborate costumes made to resemble maize stalks, their bodies adorned with green and gold fabrics to mimic the hues of ripening corn. They became living symbols of the harvest, their sacrifice seen as necessary to ensure the fields would flourish. The connection to the hero twins, the central figures of the Popol Vuh, runs deep. Just as the twins faced death and rebirth in their legendary ballgame against the lords of the underworld, The Corn Maiden's ritual mirrored this cosmic struggle. Her blood, like the twins' trials, was believed to renew the world, feeding not just the soil, but the very order of existence. Archaeological finds, like murals at San Bartolo, show May's deities with streams of blood becoming corn, a visual echo of these rites. And while the full details of the ceremonies remain shrouded, one thing is clear. To the Maya, maize was more than food. It was flesh, and its renewal demanded flesh in return. As we'll see next, this interplay between sacrifice and sustenance took even darker turns in other rituals, where the line between myth and reality blurred entirely. But while the Corn Maiden's sacrifice nourished the earth, another group of spirits demanded their own grim tribute, the Cihuatateo, the weeping women of the crossroads. These weren't ordinary ghosts, they were the tormented souls of women who died in childbirth, a fate the Aztecs considered as heroic as falling in battle. Yet instead of resting peacefully, they transformed into terrifying figures who prowled the night. Picture this: under the dim glow of the moon, these pale, skeletal women lurked at crossroads, their clawed hands reaching for any child left unattended. They were said to steal infants, curse the unwary with sickness, and even drive men mad with their wailing cries. But their rage wasn't mindless. In Aztec belief, these spirits were trapped between worlds, denied the warrior's paradise of the sun god and the peaceful afterlife of natural death. To calm their fury, priests performed eerie monthly rites on the 5 unlucky days of the Aztec calendar. At deserted crossroads, they left offerings of tamales shaped like tiny hands, symbols of both nourishment and the Cihuatateo's lost motherhood. More chillingly, they sprinkled the ground with blood from ritual pricks, a dark echo of the sacrifices these women had made in life. What makes these rites so haunting is their duality. The Aztecs both feared and revered the Cihuatateo. Some accounts suggest mothers would invoke them for protection during childbirth, even as they warned children not to wander at night. It was a delicate balance, honoring the sacredness of maternal sacrifice while guarding against its darker consequences. Archaeologists have found small clay figurines near ancient crossroads, their faces twisted in anguish, likely left as offerings. And if you listen to modern Mexican folklore, you might hear echoes of the Cihuatateo in the legend of La Llorona, the weeping woman who still searches for her lost children in the darkness. This interplay between reverence and terror leads us to our next mystery, one where reflection held more power than bloodshed. For in the polished surface of an obsidian mirror, priests claim to see not just the future, but the very fabric of the cosmos. Now we step into the shadowy realm of divination, where the Aztecs believed the future could be glimpsed in the glassy depths of obsidian. These weren't ordinary mirrors, they were the sacred tools of Tezcatlipoca, the smoking mirror god who ruled over fate itself. Imagine a priest in a darkened temple holding up a polished disc of volcanic glass as black as midnight. As torchlight flickered across its surface, swirling patterns seemed to emerge, visions of coming wars, droughts, or royal successions. What made these mirrors so powerful was their connection to Tezcatlipoca's myth. The god's very name meant smoking mirror, and legend said he used these reflective surfaces to spy on humanity. Priests trained for years to interpret the distortions in the glass, where they claimed to see everything from enemy troop movements to personal destinies. Some accounts describe them entering trances, whispering prophecies as if the mirror itself spoke through them. A remarkable discovery in 2020 brought this ritual to life. Archaeologists excavating a Maya site in Guatemala unearthed a perfectly preserved obsidian mirror buried beneath a temple floor. Its placement suggests it was more than a tool, it was a sacred object, possibly used in royal coronations or wartime decisions. Chemical analysis revealed traces of hallucinogenic plants on its surface, hinting that priests might have enhanced their visions with mind-altering substances. The most chilling detail, several of these mirrors were found with human remains nearby, leading scholars to speculate that some divinations required blood sacrifices to activate their power. Whether these reflections showed true futures or simply the priest's interpretations, one thing is clear. For the Aztecs, these obsidian discs were windows into the unknown, where every glint and shadow held cosmic significance. This fascination with reflections leads us to another ritual where guidance came not from glass, but from loyal four-legged companions, the sacred dogs who escorted souls through the underworld's treacherous rivers. Turning now to the loyal companions of the afterlife, we uncover the sacred role of the Tlaloc dogs in Mesoamerican death rites. These hairless canines weren't just pets, they were spiritual guides believed to lead their owners through the 9 treacherous rivers of Mictlan, the underworld. Ancient artwork shows these dogs painted blue, the color of sacrifice, with their leashes symbolizing the unbreakable bond between master and guardian even in death. The ritual was precise. When a noble died, a Tlaloc dog was sacrificed and buried alongside them, often adorned with jade beads or clay ornaments. The Aztecs believed the animal's keen senses could navigate the underworld's challenges, from howling winds to crushing mountains, that human souls couldn't overcome alone. Pottery from Colima depicts these dogs with alert ears and watchful eyes, forever frozen in their protective stance. Archaeology confirms this practice spanned centuries. At Teotihuacan, excavations revealed Tlaloc skeletons buried in fetal positions beside human remains, their teeth stained blue from ritual pigments. Some wore miniature clay masks, possibly to disguise them from underworld demons. Modern Tlaloc breeders in Mexico still honor this legacy, sometimes placing ceramic dogs in graves as symbolic guides, a tradition stretching back over 2,000 years. What makes these rites especially poignant is the duality they reveal. While other cultures feared the afterlife as a lonely journey, the Mesoamericans ensured no one crossed over alone. The Tlaloc's sacrifice wasn't seen as an end, but as the beginning of its most important duty, a final act of loyalty that transcended death itself. This profound connection between the living and the dead leads us next to an even more startling ritual where arrows became instruments of divine nourishment for the earth. Shifting our focus to the agricultural rites of the Tarascan people, we encounter a ritual as brutal as it was symbolic, the arrow sacrifice. Unlike the solitary journey of the Tlaloc dogs, this ceremony was a communal spectacle designed to nourish the earth itself. Captives of war or condemned criminals were bound to wooden frames in open fields, their bodies stretched taut like human canvases. Priests and warriors then took aim with arrows, not for a quick death, but to create a slow, deliberate shower of blood over the crops. The belief was starkly poetic. Each drop of blood that fell onto the soil was thought to carry the life force needed to ensure bountiful harvests. The Tarascans saw this as a sacred exchange, where human vitality fed the earth just as rain and sunlight did. The Florentine Codex, that invaluable record of Aztec life, describes similar rites among neighboring cultures. In one account, victims were shot with arrows until their bodies resembled prickly pears, their blood mingling with the soil in a grim imitation of rainfall. What makes the Tarascan version unique is its theatrical precision. Historical accounts suggest the archers aimed first for limbs, prolonging the suffering to maximize the blood spread. Some scholars argue this mirrored the painstaking care farmers took when sowing seeds, every arrow placed with intention, every wound a furrow for metaphorical growth. Archaeological evidence is scarce as the wooden frames and arrows decayed over time, but the Florentine Codex's illustrations preserve the ritual's chilling imagery, showing victims surrounded by celebrants holding baskets of grain, as if awaiting the blood's transformative touch. This rite forces us to confront a harsh truth for the Tarascans. Fertility wasn't just a gift from the gods, but a covenant sealed in human suffering. As we move from the open fields to the shadowy caves of the underworld, another ritual awaits, one where the dead weren't just buried, but deliberately arranged as messengers to the gods. Leaving behind the blood-soaked fields of the Tarascans, we now step into the realm of shapeshifters and night terrors, the world of the Nahuales. these feared Mesoamerican shamans were said to possess the chilling ability to transform into animals under the cover of darkness. Spanish colonists, already wary of indigenous spiritual practices, recorded horrified accounts of these so-called flying witches who could allegedly take the form of jaguars, owls, or even balls of fire. The transformation wasn't merely physical, it was a complete merging of human and animal spirit. Nahuales were believed to conduct their rites at crossroads or sacred caves during the darkest hours, using hallucinogenic ointments and chants to shed their human forms. Some Spanish friars wrote of encountering figures mid-transformation, their limbs elongating into claws, their eyes glowing like embers in the night. Most terrifying of all was their rumored ability to steal souls, either by sucking the breath from sleeping victims or stealing their shadow, a loss that would lead to wasting, sickness, and death. Yet there's another side to this story. Today in Oaxaca, Nahual traditions survive not as witchcraft but as healing practices. Modern Nahuales are sought after for their ability to see illnesses in a person's spirit and perform cleansings using eggs, herbs, and incense. The very same animal transformations once feared by the Spanish are now viewed as spiritual gifts, a way to journey into the unseen world and bring back wisdom. This duality captures the complexity of Mesoamerican beliefs. What one culture saw as monstrous, another revered as sacred. The Nahuales remind us that magic, like history, depends entirely on who's telling the tale. And as we prepare to explore the next ritual, consider this: if a shaman could truly become a jaguar, would you hear its approach, or would it already be too late? Moving from the shadowy transformations of the Nahuales, we now uncover a ritual where music and mortality intertwine, the haunting ceremonies of the bone flute. These weren't ordinary instruments, crafted from human femurs, often taken from revered warriors or sacrificial victims. These flutes carried more than sound, they channeled voices from beyond the grave. Archaeologists have unearthed several of these eerie artifacts at Tenochtitlan, their hollowed-out forms still bearing the marks of careful craftsmanship. The act of playing these flutes was no casual performance. Priests believed their piercing, otherworldly tones could summon ancestral spirits, drawing them into the world of the living for guidance or protection. Before major battles, warriors would gather as shamans played specific melodies, interpreting the flute's echoes as omens. A high, clear note might signal victory, while a dissonant wail could warn of impending disaster. Some legends even claim that certain flutes, when played at midnight, would cause the dead to answer with whispers only the shaman could hear. But the bone flutes weren't just tools of divination. They were also instruments of unity, bridging the gap between the living and the departed. During festivals honoring the dead, their music was said to guide lost souls back to their families, if only for a night. The symbolism was profound. The very bone that once gave a warrior strength in life now gave his people strength in death. As we leave these spectral melodies behind, one question lingers: what songs might the dead have sung through these flutes, and who among the living dared to listen? Now we step into the shadows of a ritual so secret, even sunlight dared not enter the Black Sun ceremony. Deep within the jungles of Guatemala, Maya kings would retreat into pitch-black chambers, fasting for days to face the sun god's most terrifying aspect. This wasn't the golden deity of daytime, but the darkened sun that traveled through Xibalba, the underworld, each night. Only the bravest rulers undertook this ordeal, believing it granted them visions of the cosmos' hidden truths. In 2012, archaeologists at El Zotz uncovered a chilling clue: a royal chamber painted entirely black, its walls still stained with ancient soot. Inside, they found traces of burnt offerings and jade beads, likely worn by the king during his ritual isolation. The Maya saw this darkness as a sacred space where the boundaries between worlds thinned. Here, a ruler might hear the sun god's whispers or glimpse the fate of his kingdom. The ceremony's timing was no accident. It often coincided with solar eclipses, when the sun's temporary, death mirrored the king's symbolic descent into the underworld. Emerging from the darkness, the ruler was believed to carry fragments of divine wisdom, though some legends say not all who entered returned unchanged. What secrets might those blackened walls still hold? The answer lingers like the last ember of a ritual fire swallowed by the night. But let's descend even deeper into the very belly of the earth itself. Hidden beneath the jungles of Belize lies Acton Tunashil Muknal, the cave of the crystal sepulchre. This isn't just a cavern, it's a sacred tomb where time seems to stand still. Here, the Maya arranged their dead in eerie, deliberate poses, their bones slowly encased in shimmering calcite over centuries. The most haunting of these is the so-called Crystal Maiden, a young woman whose skeleton glitters like a ghostly diamond under flashlight beams. Why place the dead in such a remote, treacherous place? To the Maya, caves were more than geological formations, they were gateways to Xibalba, the underworld. Water dripping from stalactites was thought to be the tears of the gods, and the echoing chambers were alive with whispers from the other side. Entering these caves wasn't just a journey underground, it was a pilgrimage into the realm of spirits, where priests and sacrificial victims alike communed with ancestors and deities. The artifacts left behind tell a chilling story. Shattered pottery, likely smashed to release their spiritual essence, litters the floors. Some skeletons show signs of blunt force trauma, hinting at ritual killings. Yet others are adorned with jade beads, a luxury reserved for the elite even in death. Every bone, every broken vessel was part of a carefully orchestrated dialogue between the living and the dead. What's most striking is the sheer effort these rituals required. Reaching the cave's inner chambers meant wading through underground rivers and squeezing through narrow passages, all by torchlight. This wasn't convenience, it was devotion. The Maya believed that only by confronting the darkness could they truly understand the balance of life and death. And as the flickering light dances on the Crystal Maiden's bones today, it's hard not to wonder, did they find the answers they sought? Now, let's step into the flickering glow of another sacred act, one where fire wasn't just destruction but transformation. Among the most enigmatic Mesoamerican rituals were the paper god burnings, where painted deities leaped from codices into the flames. These weren't mere books, they were vessels of divine energy, and burning them was the ultimate act of communion. Picture this, priests unrolling a bark paper codex adorned with vibrant images of gods like Quetzalcoatl or Tezcatlipoca. Each stroke of paint was a prayer, each page a conduit to the sacred. But here's the twist, these weren't meant to last. In ceremonies steeped in symbolism, the codices were set ablaze, their smoke carrying the god's essence skyward. The Maya and Aztecs believed fire didn't destroy, it liberated. By burning these sacred texts, they released the deity's power back into the cosmos, ensuring balance between worlds. Only a handful of these codices survived the flames of time and Spanish colonization. The Borgia Codex, a masterpiece of Mixtec artistry, is one such treasure. Its pages, untouched by ritual fires, reveal intricate astrological charts, gods adorned in regalia, and even instructions for divination. One section shows priests piercing their ears to draw blood, mixing it with incense as an offering. Another depicts the sacred 260-day calendar, a blueprint for when to plant, wage war, or crucially when to burn. What's haunting is how much we've lost. Spanish missionaries, seeing these texts as devilish, burned thousands. Yet the Borgia and a few others hint at the depth of Mesoamerican cosmology. These weren't just records, they were living dialogues with the divine, where destruction and creation danced in the same flame. And as the last embers of those rituals faded, one question lingers: what wisdom turned to ash that we'll never know? Next, we'll uncover how even the simplest objects, like a newborn's umbilical cord, held cosmic significance in rites that shaped destinies. Now, let's turn our attention to a rite that began at the very start of life, one where the first cut carried cosmic weight. Among the Maya and Aztecs, the moment a child was born wasn't just a biological event, it was a sacred act woven into the fabric of destiny. The cutting of the umbilical cord with an obsidian knife wasn't merely practical, it was a ritual that set the course of a person's entire life. Picture this, a midwife skilled in both medicine and magic holding a razor-sharp obsidian blade. As the newborn took its first breath, she would carefully sever the cord, but not before whispering prayers to the gods. For common families, the cord might be buried under the hearth, tying the child to the home. But for nobles, the stakes were far higher. A noble boy's cord was often taken to a battlefield and buried, a symbolic act meant to bind him to the warrior's path, ensuring courage and strength. For noble girls, the cord was buried alongside tiny weaving tools, linking her to the arts of creation and domestic power. The obsidian knife itself was no ordinary blade. Volcanic glass forged in the fires of the earth was believed to carry divine energy. Its edge was sharper than steel, a tool of both life and sacrifice, fitting for a moment that bridged the mortal and the sacred. Some scholars suggest these rites were so deeply ingrained that even the placement of the buried cord was thought to influence the child's fate, planted near a temple for a priestly future or by a marketplace for a trader's prosperity. What's fascinating is how these practices echo even today. In some modern Maya communities, variations of these rituals persist, proof of how deeply these beliefs were rooted. And as we reflect on these rites, we're left to wonder how much of who we become is written not just in our blood, but in the very first acts that welcome us into the world. Next, we'll delve into the mysterious mushroom-shaped stones that hint at rites far more mind-bending than we've yet uncovered. Now, we step into the shadowy realm of altered states and sacred visions, where ancient Mesoamericans sought communion with the divine through nature's most mysterious gifts. Among the artifacts left behind, few are as puzzling as the mushroom-shaped stones scattered across Maya and Aztec sites. These carved relics, some towering over a foot tall, bear an uncanny resemblance to psilocybin mushrooms, fungi known for their powerful hallucinogenic properties. But were they mere grinding tools, religious symbols, or something far more profound? Archaeologists have long debated their purpose. Some argue these stones were utilitarian, used to grind maize or herbs, their mushroom shape simply a stylistic choice. Yet others point to their frequent discovery in sacred spaces, often near temples or burial sites, suggesting a deeper ritual role. The most compelling clue lies in their intricate carvings. Many depict faces or deities emerging from the mushroom stem, as if the fungus itself were a portal to the spirit world. One recurring figure is the so-called mushroom god, a wide-eyed being carved into stone, his expression caught between ecstasy and terror. Could this be a depiction of a shaman mid-vision, or perhaps the deity believed to inhabit the mushrooms themselves? The connection to psilocybin is hard to ignore. Modern indigenous groups like the Aztec still use these mushrooms in sacred ceremonies to induce visions and speak with ancestors. Ancient texts such as the Maya Popol Vuh hint at similar practices, describing rituals where priests consumed flesh of the gods to traverse cosmic realms. The stones might have served as altars for these rites, or even as teaching tools, visual aids to prepare initiates for the mind-bending journey ahead. Yet mysteries linger. Why were some stones buried in caches as if hidden? Were they meant to preserve the mushroom's power or to keep them from the uninitiated? And what of the smaller handheld versions? Were they personal talismans or used in private devotion? The answers may lie in the earth itself. Recent excavations in Guatemala uncovered a mushroom stone placed deliberately atop a bed of dried psychedelic fungi, a smoking gun linking these artifacts to ritual use. As we ponder these stones, we're left with a tantalizing question. Did ancient Mesoamericans see mushrooms not just as plants, but as living bridges between worlds? Next, we'll confront the chaos of eclipses, and the desperate rituals meant to stop the sky itself from devouring the sun. Now, let's turn our gaze skyward, where the ancient Mesoamericans witnessed a celestial battle that sent entire civilizations into a frenzy. When the sun vanished behind the moon, it wasn't just an astronomical event. It was a cosmic emergency, a moment when the world teetered on the brink of annihilation. The Aztecs believed eclipses occurred when the monstrous Tzompantli, a skeletal star demon, attacked the sun god Tanatia. These fearsome creatures lurked in the darkness between stars, waiting to plunge the world into eternal night. When the sky darkened, panic erupted. Priests climbed temple steps, beating drums with frantic urgency. Their rhythms meant to feed Tanatia with spiritual energy, strengthening him for the fight. Crowds wailed and pierced their ears with magi spines, offering blood to appease the gods. Some even sacrificed captives on the spot, hoping their spilled blood would tip the cosmic scales in the sun's favor. But the terror didn't end with the eclipse. The Tzompantli were said to descend during these moments, snatching souls or cursing the unborn. Pregnant women hid indoors, their bellies shielded by obsidian knives, a desperate defense against the demon's touch. Even warriors, usually fearless, trembled at the thought of these star-born horrors. The Maya shared similar dread. Their codices depict eclipses as jagged symbols like fanged mouths devouring the sun. Kings fasted and performed penitential bloodletting, begging the gods to restore light. One chilling legend tells of the eclipse monster swallowing the sun whole, only to be tricked into releasing it by the clever hero twins, a tale echoing their famous Bolgheim myth. What's striking is how these rituals reveal a profound understanding of astronomy buried beneath the fear. Mesoamerican astronomers could predict eclipses with remarkable accuracy, yet science couldn't soothe their terror. To them, the universe was alive, a battleground where gods and monsters clashed, and humanity's survival depended on playing their part. As the drums faded and sunlight returned, relief washed over the cities. But the memory lingered, a reminder that darkness could return at any moment. Next, we'll unearth a different kind of offering: rubber balls buried in sacred springs, their purpose as elastic as the rituals themselves. Now, let's step into the shadowy depths of Illuminati, where the Earth has guarded an eerie secret for over 3,500 years. Here, buried in the sacred springs, lie dozens of rubber balls, some as large as a human head, others small enough to cradle in your palm. But these weren't toys or sporting equipment. They were offerings carefully placed in the waterlogged soil, their purpose as enigmatic as the rituals that left them there. The Olmec, often called Mesoamerica's mother culture, crafted these balls from the sap of the rubber tree, a substance they revered as magical. Some scholars believe they were gifts to the rain god, tossed into the springs to plead for life-giving storms. Others argue they symbolized seeds of rebirth, their round forms echoing the cycle of life, death, and renewal. What's undeniable is their sacred role. Each ball was a bridge between the human world and the divine. What makes these burials even more haunting is their preservation. The oxygen-poor waters of Illuminati's springs acted like a time capsule, keeping the rubber from decaying. When archaeologists unearthed them, the balls still held their shape, some even bearing fingerprints pressed into the surface millennia ago. It's as if the Olmec themselves reached through time, leaving a tangible mark of their devotion. But the mystery deepens. Alongside the balls, researchers found carved wooden scepters, jade axes, and even the bones of infants, hinting at a ritual far more complex than a simple offering. Were these objects part of a grand ceremony to bless the land, or did they accompany sacrifices, their rubber counterparts serving as symbolic stand-ins for human lives? The answers may lie in the Olmec's belief that water wasn't just a resource, it was a living force, a doorway to the underworld. As we piece together these clues, one truth emerges: the rubber balls of Illuminati weren't just objects. They were prayers frozen in time, waiting for us to decipher their silent language. Next, we'll witness a ritual where dance becomes devotion, a vibrant, living tradition that still echoes through the mountains of Mexico. Now, let's shift from the silent mysteries of El Manote to a ritual alive with color, movement, and sacred energy, the deer dance of the Huicol people. Unlike the ancient rites we've explored, this tradition isn't confined to history books. It pulses through the mountains of western Mexico even today, a vibrant thread connecting the past to the present. At the heart of the ceremony is the deer, a creature revered as the first shaman who brought light to the world. Dancers adorned with elaborate headdresses and intricate beadwork embody this sacred animal, their movements mimicking its grace and strength. But this isn't just performance, it's a spiritual journey. The dancers enter a trance-like state, guided by peyote, the hallucinogenic cactus the Huicol consider a divine gift. Through rhythmic steps and chants, they commune with the spirit of the deer, channeling its power to heal and renew their community. What makes the deer dance so mesmerizing is its duality. It's both a celebration of life and a plea for balance. The Huicol believe the dance ensures the sun's return, the rain's arrival, and the earth's fertility. Every leap and turn is a prayer, a reminder that humans are part of a larger cosmic order. Modern ceremonies often last for days, with entire villages participating, their faces painted in vivid patterns that mirror the hallucinatory visions induced by peyote. Yet beneath the beauty lies a deeper truth. The deer dance is a resistance, a defiant act of cultural survival. Despite centuries of outside influence, the Huicol have guarded their rituals with fierce devotion. When you watch the dancers today, you're witnessing more than tradition. You're seeing a living testament to resilience, a people who have refused to let their sacred stories fade. As the drums fade and the dancers rest, we're left with a question. What does it mean to keep a ritual alive for generations? The answer might lie not in the past, but in the heartbeat of the present. Next, we'll uncover how blood became ink in the bonds of ancient alliances, where nobles sealed their fates with a single, sacred cut. Now, let's step into the shadowed chambers of power, where loyalty wasn't sworn with words alone, but with blood. Among the Aztec elite, the most binding agreements weren't signed on parchment. They were sealed in pain and fire through a ritual known as the Obsidian Blade Blood Pact. Imagine this scene. Two nobles stand in a torchlit room, their faces etched with solemn determination. A priest hands them razor-sharp obsidian blades, the volcanic glass gleaming like black ice. Without flinching, each man pierces his own tongue or earlobe, letting crimson droplets fall onto strips of bark paper. This wasn't mere symbolism. The Aztecs believed blood carried tonally life force, and by mingling theirs, the men fused their destinies. Then the paper was set ablaze, the rising smoke carrying their oath to the gods themselves. These pacts weren't just personal, they shaped empires. Historians trace the famed Triple Alliance, the powerhouse coalition of Tenochtitlan, Texcoco, and Tlacopan, to such blood ceremonies. When rulers like Nezahualcoyotl and Itzcoatl needed unbreakable trust, they didn't exchange rings or handshakes, they shared wounds. The act was so sacred that breaking a blood oath meant inviting divine wrath, with legends speaking of traitors struck by lightning or consumed by jaguars. What's chilling is how these rituals blurred the line between politics and the supernatural. The burning paper wasn't just a contract, it was a telaminalistly, a debt payment to the gods for their favor in war or trade. Modern excavations near Templo Maya have uncovered charred bark fragments, some still stained with iron traces, silent witnesses to these fiery alliances. Yet the blood pacts reveal a deeper truth about Mesoamerican power. Even the mightiest rulers bowed to ritual. A king might command armies, but his authority hinged on these sacred gestures. Next, we'll descend into the steam-filled darkness of the sweat lodges, where warriors didn't cleanse their bodies but their very souls. Leaving behind the blood-soaked oaths of rulers, we now enter a different kind of sacred space, one where the air itself was thought to hold ancient wisdom. Among the Aztecs and Maya, steam baths weren't just for cleansing the body. They were portals to the past where the very steam rising from hot stones was called the sweat of the ancestors. Picture this, a low, windowless hut, its walls sealed tight with clay. Inside, glowing stones radiate heat as a shaman pours water infused with herbs over them. The room fills with thick, fragrant steam, but this was no ordinary sauna. To the Mesoamericans, that swirling mist carried the essence of those who came before. As shamans inhaled the vapor, they believed they were breathing in the knowledge of their forebears, their visions sharpened by psychoactive plants like ololiuqui or sacred mushrooms. These temazcals, as they were called, weren't just spiritual retreats. They were preparation for life's most pivotal moments. Warriors steamed before battle to purify themselves. Women used them after childbirth, believing the steam healed both body and soul. Even rulers underwent these rites, emerging reborn for coronations or major decisions. The heat was so intense that Spanish chroniclers wrote of participants collapsing, only to be revived with cold water, a symbolic death and resurrection. What's fascinating is how science now backs some of these ancient beliefs. Modern research shows that certain herbs used in temazcals, like eucalyptus or sage, have antimicrobial properties. The heat-induced trance states, they likely triggered endorphin releases, heightening focus and resilience. Archaeologists have found sweat lodges aligned with solstice sunrises, suggesting they doubled as celestial observatories. Yet the most haunting detail comes from Mayan texts. Some describe shamans hearing whispers in the steam voices of long-dead kings offering counsel. Whether myth or altered perception, one thing's clear: for Mesoamericans, the past wasn't gone. It lingered in the air, waiting to be inhaled. Next, we'll uncover how warriors wielded mirrors not just as weapons, but as shields against the unseen. But the unseen world wasn't just heard, it was reflected. Now we turn to the gleaming surfaces that warriors trusted to guard them against forces beyond human sight. For the Aztecs, no weapon was more mystical than the mirrored shields carried by the elite warrior priests of Tezcatlipoca, the smoking mirror god. These weren't just tools of war, they were portals to the divine. Crafted from polished obsidian or pyrite mosaics, these shields shimmered like fragments of the night sky. Warriors believed the reflective surfaces could capture and deflect evil, malicious spirits, curses, even the ill will of enemies. In battle, the flash of sunlight off these shields wasn't just tactical. It was a spiritual weapon, dazzling foes both physical and supernatural. The 2021 discovery at Templo Maya revealed just how sacred these objects were. Archaeologists unearthed a shield fragment inlaid with hundreds of tiny pyrite tiles, each painstakingly cut to create a seamless, mirror-like surface. What's striking is where it was found buried alongside sacrificial knives, suggesting these shields weren't just carried into battle but used in rituals to ward off cosmic threats. Tezcatlipoca's priests took this further. They believed the god himself watched through these mirrors, his gaze piercing the veil between worlds. Some accounts describe shamans staring into the shields until their reflections twisted into visions, omens of coming wars or plagues. The most terrifying legend, that if a warrior saw his own face vanish in the mirror's surface, it meant Tezcatlipoca had marked him for death. Modern experiments show there's eerie science behind the magic. Pyrite's high reflectivity creates disorienting flashes, which could explain why enemies reported seeing phantom warriors in the glare. And obsidian's natural conductivity, still used today in spiritual practices, might have amplified the shield's reputation as conduits for energy. Yet for all their power, these mirrors held a grim irony. The same surface that deflected harm also revealed hard truths. Just as Tezcatlipoca was both protector and trickster, his shields didn't just ward off fate, they sometimes showed it coming. Next, we'll step into the tombs where rulers sought to cheat death itself, their faces forever preserved in the stone of the underworld. But death, for the Mesoamerican elite, was never the end, it was a transformation. And nothing captures this belief more vividly than the shimmering jade masks that adorned the faces of kings in their tombs. These weren't mere burial ornaments, they were passports to the afterlife, crafted with such precision that they still gleam centuries later. Take the mask of Pakal the Great, the legendary Maya ruler of Palenque. When archaeologists uncovered his tomb in 1952, they found his face covered in a mosaic of over 300 jade pieces, each no larger than a fingernail. The mask wasn't just a portrait, it depicted Pakal as the young maize god, his eyelids inlaid with obsidian to glimmer like living eyes in the underworld. The message was clear: this king wasn't dead, he was reborn. Jade held cosmic significance. Its green hue mirrored the life-giving maize plant, and its durability symbolized unbreakable eternity. The Maya called it Yax, meaning first or precious, believing it carried the breath of the gods. Crafting these masks was a sacred act. Artisans used cords and abrasive sand to painstakingly shape each piece, then secured them with tree resin adhesive. The result, a face that would never decay, just as the soul never faded. But the masks weren't generic. Recent studies reveal how they mirrored the wearer's actual features. Pakal's pronounced nose, for instance, was exaggerated in jade to emphasize his divine lineage. Some masks even had movable jaws, allowing the deceased to speak in the afterlife, and the backs often bore hieroglyphs naming the ruler and their gods, a literal signature of immortality. The most haunting detail, many masks were placed not just over the face but pressed into the decomposing skin, fusing with the bone. This wasn't decoration, it was alchemy. By merging jade with flesh, the dead became one with the stone's eternal power. Next, we'll descend deeper into the underworld, where the rhythmic pounding of sacred drums was said to echo the heartbeat of the earth itself. Now, let's step into the echoing darkness where sound itself became a bridge to the underworld. The Mesoamericans believed the earth was alive, its pulse thrumming beneath their feet, and they recreated that rhythm with the haunting beats of the Tzompantli drum. These weren't ordinary drums, carved from hollowed-out logs or, in some chilling cases, human femur bones. The Tzompantli produced a deep, resonant tone that seemed to vibrate through the body. The Aztecs called it the voice of the gods, and its hypnotic rhythms were central to ceremonies honoring Tlaloc, the earth monster whose gaping jaws devoured the dead. The design was as symbolic as it was functional. Many drums were carved with intricate depictions of deities or serpents, their open mouths forming the drum's slits. When struck with rubber-tipped mallets, the dual-toned beats mimicked Tlaloc's heartbeat, slow, primal, and unending. Priests used these rhythms to enter trances, their chants syncing with the drum to commune with spirits. But the most unsettling Tzompantli were those crafted from human bones. Warriors who died in battle or sacrifice were considered sacred, and their femurs hollowed, polished, and fitted with drum heads became instruments of divine power. The belief was simple: the drum retained the warrior's courage, channeling it into every beat. During the new fire ceremony, the Tzompantli's sound was said to guide the sun through the underworld's dangers. And in the quiet of the night, its echoes were thought to soothe Tlaloc herself, ensuring she wouldn't shake the earth apart in hunger. Next, we reach the final act, a ruler's last bloodletting, where life and death intertwined one final time. Now we arrive at the most solemn of all Mesoamerican rites, the final bloodletting, where even in death, kings performed one last sacred duty. For the Maya, a ruler's passing wasn't just an end. It was a carefully orchestrated ritual to ensure their journey into the afterlife. At the heart of this tradition was the belief that royal blood held divine power. As death approached, Maya kings like Pakal the Great of Palenque would perform a final blood offering, often piercing their tongues, ears, or genitals with obsidian blades. The blood was collected on bark paper, then burned as fragrant smoke, carrying prayers to the gods. The Palenque inscriptions give us a rare glimpse into these rituals. They describe how Pakal, weak with age, summoned his priests for his final act. With trembling hands, he drew his own blood one last time, offering it to the gods who had guided his 68-year reign. The act wasn't just symbolic, it was a binding contract sealing his passage through the 9 layers of Xibalba, the Maya underworld. What makes this rite so haunting is its intimacy. Unlike public sacrifices, this was a private surrender, a king, once mighty, willingly shedding his life force to maintain cosmic balance. Archaeologists found traces of these rituals in royal tombs, bloodletting tools placed beside the dead, as if ready for use in the afterlife. And so, with this final offering, the cycle closed. The ruler's blood nourished the gods, just as their divine favor had once nourished his kingdom. It was a fitting end to our journey through Mesoamerica's mysteries, where even death was not an end but a sacred transformation. As we close this journey through the shadows of ancient Mesoamerica, one truth stands clear: these civilizations saw no divide between the sacred and the savage. From the soaring Voladores dancing with the heavens to the blood-stained stones of Tenochtitlan, every ritual wove together wonder and terror in equal measure. The Maya, Aztec, and Olmec worlds were places where jade masks gleamed atop skeletal remains, where the same hands that carved celestial calendars also flayed living skin in honor of the gods. What makes these rites so unforgettable isn't just their shock value, it's how they reveal a world view where death fed life, where sacrifice sustained the cosmos. The ball player's decapitation mirrored the sun's daily rebirth. The child's tears for Tlaloc became life-giving rain. Even in their darkest acts, these cultures sought harmony with forces far greater than themselves. So tell us, which ritual left you most awestruck? Was it the sacred cenote's silent depth swallowing gold and souls alike? The flayed priests of Xipe Totec, their rotting skins a promise of spring? Or perhaps Pakal's final bloodletting, where a king's dying breath became a prayer? Drop your thoughts in the comments. We're as fascinated by your reactions as by the mysteries themselves. And if you think these rites were extraordinary, just wait until we uncover the secrets of Mesoamerica's lost cities, where towering pyramids still whisper forgotten names, and jungle-choked temples guard relics no modern eye has seen. Hit subscribe and ring that notification bell, because this is one exploration you won't want to miss. Until then, remember, history's greatest mysteries aren't just about what we find, but what we're still learning to understand.